Like, what does it look like to grow into someone different than your family, and how do we make peace without disconnecting from them? Because that is such a hard thing to do. I remember
Yeah.
just coming back to my family after leaving. I was the first person to graduate high school and go to college in my family, and I'm going from a small town called Bombay Beach in California, where there's no Caucasian people, to coming to Minnesota, where it's all Caucasian people. I'm learning about different things like politics and the world and all these things that we didn't talk about. And I go back home, I'm like, yo, I'm different. And I really struggle with that. So how does someone deal with that without like accepting that they're changing and not disconnect from their family?
Yeah, well, at the core of every human desire is a need for belonging. And that's what you're speaking to. It's knowing
Mm,
that I can still belong a part of my family system without feeling exiled or ostracized just because I have different cultures, customs, belief systems, values, or just way of being from my family. Because often our nuclear family kind of shapes us to be the same, and often your parent is raising you with certain values and belief
hmm
systems. And when you start to break from that, people might have things to say. And it can be a very uncomfortable place. But that discomfort comes from knowing that we still want to belong. We still want to be cared for by this family system, but we also want this family system to make room for knowing that we are different. And so I do think there's a lot of grief work that comes with recognizing you do have different belief systems from your family. You engage in healing different from your family, and especially those behaviors that you recognize are toxic. You're trying to be the cycle breaker. You're trying to have real conversations instead of sweeping things under the rug. You're trying to hold people accountable or expect them to hold themselves accountable, and they're too emotionally immature to do so. So it can also become a very lonely space to be in, and it puts you in a predicament where you're now grieving and engaging in what we called ambiguous loss, where your family is physically present, but it kind of feels like they're psychologically absent because you are on different psychological fields. And so you are emotionally mature, you're self-attuned, you're engaging in community care, you're developing these healthy practices, while it can sometimes feel as if your family isn't doing any of the work. And also sometimes there's grief because you become disinterested now.
hmm
Like, I don't even want to call and tell you, I don't even want to go to Thanksgiving dinner because it's just going to be chaos. And it's something that I've done so much work to regulate my nervous system. I don't want to be in an environment that's going to re trigger me. So, this is where the importance of chosen family comes in, as well as community care practices, where I always tell people, a big part of my work around siblinghood is recognizing that we have biological siblings, but we also have chosen siblings. The same way we have our biological family, but we also have chosen family. And because belonging is what we're really yearning for and searching for, sometimes we have to choose a family we're not tied to by blood so that we feel accepted, so that we feel heard, so that we feel seen, while also being able to hold space on the other end of recognizing this isn't personal. So let me not see this as an attack against who I am. Let me be able to see this as my family is operating the way they want to operate from their own trauma history, from whatever it is that has happened to them. Their inability to see me for who I am actually has nothing to do with me. And I think that separation is so important because sometimes we over identify with our trauma. And so if we feel excluded, we say, I'm not good enough. If we feel unseen, we say, I'm not worthy. Instead of reframing that by saying, I feel unheard by my family, and it's probably because they're operating from their own system of dysfunction that I've chosen to step away from. It has nothing to do with me, right? It's that concept of I made a mistake, I must be a failure. No, you made a mistake. And so, in the context of family, there's a lot of grief work that comes when you are being the person who's choosing to do something different. But I also think one of the things that we can do to be able to have those nourishing relationships with our family is to also remember, too, sometimes we're the ones changing because we're growing. Sometimes we want to be able to assess and look back and say, I used to be just as toxic as they are. But now I'm choosing to be better. And so this is where you can hold compassion in grace and empathy, while also being able to say, I have to choose a family because this one isn't fully safe enough for me to exist in as a whole person. And so when I'm around them, I might have to compartmentalize. But around the chosen family, I can be my full self. And since I don't want to be estranged from my family, that just means I have to compartmentalize when I'm around them because they're not ready for the fullness of who I am.
I've never said this on a podcast. I've only said this to a few people, but I feel like I'm being dishonest if I don't say this. When I go back home, I always tell my wife, I have to go home and I have to play the game. Because if I'm myself, I am going to be disconnected from them and they will be uncomfortable and I will be uncomfortable. So I have to go and play the game. I am fully myself when I'm with my family, but I'm not the same anymore. And when I was myself around them, my new self, it made everybody uneasy. I got made fun of for how I would talk. I got made fun of, made fun of is kind of harsh. I would like be kind of like, I'll get these looks like, what? I was a really like, we're coming up on time. I'm sorry. I'm gonna wrap up. I'm gonna wrap up here soon. Last year I went home and like I was the oldest. I was kind of like rebellious and kind of like mean. It's kind of how my family would kind of label me. But again, I was a kid just trying to figure it out. And now I'm like really articulate. I really can feel myself and my emotions and label them. So I give my family a lot of advice now. You would never think that it was me that would give advice. And my auntie said like CJ was an a-hole. I would never think that he was like this now. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just like, oh, that kind of shocks me a little bit. You know what I mean? So now as I hear you talk, I'm like being able to like choose your new family is such an important thing that I wish everybody would just be okay with and not take offense to it because it's a real thing. And I think that you can find family who you can be your new self around and still go back and with your, family and play the game. I have no idea if that makes sense, but that's what I've always experienced.
It absolutely makes sense. I think what you're speaking to is survival, right? We learn to adapt in our environment for the sake of trying to survive in that environment. And I think that it's important to honor those tools because I feel like sometimes we tell ourselves we shouldn't have to do that. There's a lot of things in life we shouldn't have to do. But we recognize if I want to survive in this environment, and when I say survive, I don't mean you're in danger, but we understand that survival pretty much means how can I be regulated so that my body is not in a state of fight, flight, or freeze, right? Because I recognize there's a large sense of discomfort in this environment. And I recognize it's uncomfortable for them. I recognize it's uncomfortable for me. There are some people too where you can develop all the skills that you can to be a better communicator. But if the person you're talking to doesn't know how to communicate, it doesn't matter how healthy you become at communicating, you're going to be talking to a wall because they're going to be defensive. They don't want to hear you. They're going to twist everything that you're saying. They're going to gaslight you. So I say that too, because sometimes we find that in order to develop the capacity to be in certain environments, we also are recognizing what is the thing that's going to allow me to stay in tune with my peace right now. And if I'm in this environment, I know the thing that's going to help me have peace is by playing the game versus forcing other people to be mature enough to accept me for who I am. That's going to be exhausting for me because that's a learning lesson that they have to take on. But I'm making myself responsible for their emotional healing by being in this environment and forcing them to have certain conversations or be a certain way because they can't handle the fullness of who I am.